In this module we're going to look at group views. If we just take a look at an action block we've developed in previous modules, we've used views like import views to pass data into the action block, export views to return data from the action block, local views for any local processing like incrementing a counter, and entity action views for accessing the database, either through a read statement to read data, or a delete statement, or a create statement to create data. These views are singleton views. They only contain data from one record, one user ID, one logon timestamp. Group views allow us to store arrays of data. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to create a new action block, which I'm going to call list logon history. And within this action block, I'm going to return a group view of the logon history. And a group view is typically used for repeating data, so we specify the number of rows that we can have in our group view. They need to be sized within CHN. You can't have a variable size array. So I'll size this at 10. So what I want to do is read all of the logon history and place the data into this group view, and the group view will contain an entity view which I'll name outg, and that contains the logon timestamp. So I want an array of 10 logon history records in my group view. So to do that, I'm going to need to read the logon history, so I need an entity action view for it, and I also need to read it for a particular user, so I need a view of the user as well. I need to know which is the user, so I'll use the similar approach to the validate logon, where I'll read it for the logon work user ID. So I'm just going to copy that statement and paste it in here, and note that that creates the views for me. And then I want to read all of, so read each, the logon history records. And the logon history records for a user, so that's a where the desired logon history is for, and then I can either choose current user, which is the way we did that within the validate logon history, but to use current user here I must have established currency on the user with a read. But in this case I don't want to read the user, I don't need to. So instead of saying current user, I use say some user, and then you specify which is the user. So that's with an and that user ID equals temp user. Now with a read each we need to specify where the data goes. With an implicitly indexed group view, the way we do that is with a targeting clause, so targeting the group view, and we probably also want to sort as well. And then I need a move statement, so I want to move each of the logon history records read to the export view. So the targeting is used so that the indexing of the group view is initialized to 0, which is what the from the beginning means, and the read each will stop if we fill the group view up, which is what the until full means. Implicit group views are quite easy to code using these constructs, but they can be a bit inflexible, so as a matter of preference I prefer to use, rather than implicitly indexed group views, I prefer explicitly indexed. So instead of implicitly indexing it, I'm going to manage the indexing myself. So the way I do that is to increment a special attribute called the subscript, which is the index of the group view. So I'm going to set the subscript to the last +1, so that for each row read I increment the subscript and move the data into the indexed row of the group view. And then if there was more than 10, if I didn't put any error handling in, if I tried to put an 11th row into this group view, I would get a runtime error. So I need to test that. So if it's full, I'm going to stop at that point. So that's the use of an explicitly indexed group view. So if we now look at our menu, I want to show the logon history on the window, and what I'm going to do is add in an action into the menu. So I'm going to create a menu item, and I'll call that logon history. And because I'm going to pop up a dialog, put my 3 dots in there as my window standard, which probably ought to also be done for the logon, just to indicate to the user that that function brings up another dialog. So for my logon history, what I want to do is display the logon rows in a separate dialog, a secondary dialog. So I'm going to switch to the Windows tab here, and I'm going to add a new dialog, logon history. So there's my logon history, and I need to specify here in my menu that when I click on this menu action, what do I want to do? I want to open the logon history. So clicking on that will open this dialog. When we open the dialog, we actually want to get the data. So in other words, we want to call our list logon action block. And so what I'm going to do is add some logic which is called when this dialog opens, and that's in something called an open event. And I'll run an event called get history, and then here get history is the event action. And so what I want to do now is get the data by calling this action block, and using our same client-server design, I'm going to use my existing logon server, and in that I'm going to create a new function. So a command of list, I'm going to use my list logon history action block. View match in my logon work user ID and return my group out history in here, an export view. And as a matter of preference, I'm going to move the group out history to the bottom of the group view. So there's my new function within my server, and here I need to specify the command that I want to run. This command is list, view match in my logon work, and return my export view group out history. So there's my export view, which I'll just move down here, and I will copy it to create an import view, and then I can use this data in my dialog box. So in my logon history, I'm going to display the data from the group view, and to do that I'm going to use a listbox control. And my listbox size there, and we specify where the data comes from by binding the listbox to a group view, the group out history, and then we can specify which column we want. So there's that column, which I'll call timestamp, and I don't want to use that full default edit pattern, so I'm going to add in my own year, month, day, hour, and minute timestamp, and then view match my logon history there. So there's my data in the logon history. So when we open the dialog, we execute this event which calls the logon server. The logon server with the command of list calls this action block, and that action block reads the data. So now we can generate and test that. One thing to notice is because we changed the views of the logon server, within CAGen you need to regenerate any programs that call it. So the logon server is called by the menu and the logon, and an easy way of doing that within Studio Developer is to use this generate used by function, which will work out all of the modules that call that, and so it flags the logon for generation as well. So now I can generate that, build it, and then test. So I can log on, and then look at my logon history, and there are the logon history records for this user. So that concludes our first look at group views. Essentially, we've created the group view within the action block. We're putting data from the entity action view into the group view. Because it's an explicitly indexed group view, we manage the subscripting in our own logic. We can view match the data as the group view and use that in the user interface design as either a list box, or you could use a non-enterable drop down as well.